Hi everyone, welcome back to JTube Movies. I am here to be doing something a little different. I'm still reacting, but instead to a video that I own from my grandfather's interview regarding his experience during World War II and escaping to Australia. He was interviewed professionally, and we're so lucky to have this video still. It's not in the best quality because we've converted it from VHS to DVD to now screen recording, so please forgive the lowish quality. But yeah, I have seen this before for full transparency, but it was about 7 years ago, maybe even more. So I unfortunately don't remember a lot of it. It's been a very long time since I've watched this. And yeah, so it is my grandfather's story, and on my dad's side, so my dad's dad. He unfortunately passed away when I was 3, so I didn't get to know him too well, sadly, but I do remember him very well, which is impressive because I don't know, I guess just those are my so few memories of him that I held on to it. And thankfully though, my grandma on my dad's side, so my dad's mum, is still alive. We just celebrated her 90th birthday last year, and this year in June she'll be 91. And yeah, you'll probably see her in this video as well, if I remember correctly. And this is quite vulnerable for me, so I really hope you will enjoy. These interviews were actually sponsored by Steven Spielberg, and obviously it wasn't him directly, but he sponsored a bunch of different interviewers to go and record the stories of survivors so that they would last, because unfortunately, in my experience and many others, survivors don't like to talk about it too much, and they struggle with talking about it frequently. So if they can just talk about it in a one video, then at least it'll be there forever that people can refer to. So yeah, I'm just blabbing on, but I'm very grateful, very lucky that I have this footage, and I'm going to watch it with you all. So I hope you enjoy. Please be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and let's get to it. Okay. The pen is so faded you can hardly see.
The 28th of March 1995. The survivor is Emanuel Mansberg.
This is before I was born.
Is Danny Katz. We're in Sydney, Australia, and the interview is in English.
And that is the interviewer.
Tell me when you're ready. My name is Danny Katz, D-A-N-I-K-A-T-Z. The date is 28th of March 1995.
2 years before I was born.
I'm conducting today's interview with Mr. Emanuel Mansberg in the city of Sydney, New South Wales, Australia.
Yep. And there he is. That's my grandpa. We called him Saba. And we call my grandma Safta.
Thank you, Emanuel, for your time. I'd like to begin this afternoon's interview. If you could tell us your name and spell your name, please.
My name is Emanuel Mansberg. Spelling E-M-A-N-U-E-L. Mansberg, M-A-N-S-B-E-R-G.
He's so cute.
Did you have any other names when you were born?
No.
Are you known by any other names, nicknames?
Yes, Manny.
Manny.
Right. Spell it, please.
M-A-N-N-Y.
And what is your date of birth?
In Australia, you have to shorten
9th
everything.
of May, 1929.
1929.
And your age today, please.
Well, 65. I'll be 66 in May this year.
All right. And your city of birth and country of birth and the spelling, please.
I was born in a city called Lvov, L for Leslie, L-W-O-W, in Poland.
Now it's Ukraine,
P-O-L-A-N-D.
but it used to be in Poland.
Thank you. If we could begin today's interview with your recollections, your memories of what life was like in Lvov as you were growing up.
Before the war?
Before the war, yes.
Well, we lived on street in Poland, on an apartment on the first floor. It was a large apartment. The family consisted of my father, mother, and 3 children. I had older sister and brother.
He was the youngest.
And I went to school, to a private school, which was very close. It was a Hebrew school. And I was around about 10 years old when the war broke out.
Okay, your brothers, sisters, and your parents. Do you know? Could you tell us their names and spell their names for us, please?
Yes, his father was his name was Usher, Uscher, Usher Mansberg.
Cute.
My mother's name was Gusta,
I knew that, Gusta.
Gusta.
I didn't know about Usher.
Her maiden surname was Grunbaum, Grunbaum.
Grunbaum.
My sister's name was Evelyn, and my brother's name was Erwin.
So all E's.
Spelling?
Oh, no, that's okay, I think. Grandparents, did you have grandparents living with you before the war?
We had no. Grandparents didn't live with us.
Interesting.
What sort of occupation, livelihood did your parents have? Your father, he was working. Your mother, was she working?
No, my father was he, in partnership with his brother, they had by European standards, a very large business exporting eggs from Poland
Eggs.
to
Nice.
other European countries.
And your mother, did she work with your
No.
father?
She
did
stayed
not
at
work.
home.
She was just a housewife.
But
The
Jewish identity, Jewish background, what sort of Jewishness did your family have?
Well, they were not, you could say they are very orthodox. They were just like members of the Jewish middle class in Poland. So we were probably went to synagogue. My father, I don't think, went to synagogue more than 2 or 3 times a year.
Yeah, that's
about
pretty typical for a lot
Did you
of Jews who
celebrate
aren't
any of
Orthodox.
the Jewish festivals?
Yes, usually
You'll celebrate
the
the stuff
Pesach.
at home. Yeah, Pesach.
and
Rosh
actually
Hashanah.
the New Year, and of course the Yom Kippur, and
Yeah, sometimes.
at times a thing like Purim, and that's about all.
Also, sorry if I'm looking a bit down. The
You said you
screen's a bit
went to
lower.
a Jewish school.
Yes,
Jewish...
it was a Hebrew actually school. But everything was taught. We were taught in Hebrew,
Wow.
with the exception of Polish language, Polish history,
Okay, Polish history
and
still.
and I think mathematics. Everything else.
Was it a large Jewish school?
Yes, it was a large Jewish school.
Probably
yes.
would have been
Would
one
you
of
have
the
any
few
idea
that
how
existed
many
there.
students would be there?
Oh, but it was including a high school. I actually went only to the primary school there.
Ah, okay.
Probably would be something like 400 to 500 children.
Right. The size of the Jewish population in Lvov, would you have, in relation to the general non-Jewish population?
Well, the total population of Lvov before the war was about 300,000 people.
Okay.
1/3 were Jewish,
Oh, wow, okay.
1/3 Poles, and 1/3 were of Ukrainian background.
Yeah, because it is like
And
now
relations
it's
between
Ukraine.
the Jewish population and the Polish and the Ukrainian, generally speaking, in the 1930s before the war, how would you describe these relations?
Well, they went too good. There were persecution of all kinds. You see, the
I mean, the 1930s were a bit brutal.
Jewish, for instance, there was only numerous clauses which was restricted admission to universities for Jewish students. And there were sort of right wing, you could call it, national organizations of university students, which had occasionally were attacking Jewish citizens. Was,
What would the reaction have been? Was there a reaction by the Jewish population?
well, no, not physical. It was trying to appeal to the government, to the local authorities for protection, and officially they were not supposed to be happening.
Right, but it did anyway.
Obviously the authorities looked through.
From your understanding of that time, I realise you were a young boy at the time.
Yeah.
He was very young.
Would there have been restrictions on Jewish population in terms of jobs, professions?
Yes, of course.
How do you mean? What sort of jobs?
Certainly for certain government jobs, the Jews would not be admitted, especially high government positions.
Yeah, so official positions.
Very few. They were actually like members of parliaments representing the Jewish population.
Oh, right, yeah.
But they were very, very few.
Yeah, but that
in
happened with a
relation
lot
to
of
the total population.
gypsy populations as well, but
More
they're
than
just
3 million
constantly
Jews,
persecuted.
3.5 million Jews nearly, in the population of Poland, which had something like 34 million people. And the admission to, even if they finished their professional education in other countries and came and were admitted, they were usually restricted. Doctors, Jewish doctors, naturally would not be admitted to the top hospitals, or the lawyers naturally was the restricted possibilities, only doing a lot of conveyancing and probably this sort of thing. That's and of course in business, Jewish businesses were usually taxed more heavily than the others, and always problems. And that's about the recollections I have.
A few moments ago you said that your family was like middle class, was that right?
No, I could say upper middle class.
Upper middle
Yes.
Yeah.
How
They
was
were
that
well enough to do
in
private
reflection
primary
of
school
the
and stuff?
total Jewish population? What was the average standard of the Jewish population in Lvov?
Well, it was the Jewish population, I would say 80% of the Jewish population were very, very poor in Poland.
Oh, okay.
Probably
So he was an exception.
10 to 15 or 16% were what they call it the middle class, which were the educated, the people who have finished at least high schools or universities. And they came from usually, you could call it rich background of businessmen. Their parents were so. And there were probably 1 or 2% who were very, very wealthy.
Okay.
Religious orthodoxy in Lvov, what proportion of the community would have been orthodox or not orthodox?
Well.
Oh, it would be the proportion would be the poorer section of the community was very orthodox.
Yeah.
So I would say 70-80% would be what you would term orthodox.
That's
Jews. And
huge.
they lived in the in those days it was sort of Jewish quarters and
a Jewish section of town.
Yes.
Did you and your family live in this part of town?
No, we didn't. So we were living in the other section of the town.
With other Polish and
city,
Ukrainian people.
Removed from the other areas.
Did you have any help or assistants or maids or people living with us?
Yes, we had the number one. I had a wet nurse.
Could you explain what a wet nurse is, please?
Well, a wet nurse in Poland was a
nanny.
A woman who was employed to feed the infant.
Breastfeed infants and nanny
them. And usually stayed with the family. And she lived with us. And besides that, we had
And she was Christian.
another maid, you could say, who did attend to cleaning and cooking and these sort of things. Yes.
How long did these people stay with you till moving towards the late 1930s? When would they have lost contact with you or been forced to leave your family?
Well, it did not happen till my nurse stayed with us right through, but any other help disappeared with the beginning of when the war broke
she would have
out
been
in
attached
1939.
from breastfeeding with them.
1st of September 1939.
Like her own, like,
What events
family
happened
members.
before 1939 that would have affected Lvov?
Before 39?
Before 39, or before the 1st of September 39,
What?
with the Russian contact or things like
Well,
that?
we didn't have 30. When the war broke out, then Poland was divided between Germany and Russia.
Yeah.
Or at that time,
Between a rock and a hard
Soviet-
place.
USSR, as
Yeah.
it was.
Soviet
United
Union.
And they walked in to Poland and they took half of the eastern part of Poland, and we were under the Russian regime, while the western part of Poland, after the war, the 39 war, was under the German regime.
Do you know what date that would have been, roughly?
When the Russians came in,
When the partition...
I love when he-
when the
Russia-
partition,
Squints to think.
well, they came in very early. The war didn't last longer than, I think, 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks.
My dad does that
How
now
were
as
the
well. When he's,
conditions under the Russians?
when he's
Well,
thinking.
Now, when I look back, of course, the condition, by comparison with the German conditions weren't too bad. It's only that they introduced, of course, they forced us to accommodate additional families in our apartment. I remember we had the apartment on the first floor, something like 6 or 7 big rooms with the 2 or 3 bathrooms. And they have allocated other families practically to that we were left, I remember, with only 3 rooms initially. And even then, later on, it was reduced to something like 2 rooms.
But economic conditions, social conditions, food...
Well, the food was, of course, there wasn't as much food as it was before under the Polish regime. And most of the things like sugar, butter, sausages, and meat were you had to stand in a queue, very long queues, in order to be able to buy, because the delivery to the shops was
So few.
sporadic, and usually you had to line up and until they exhausted the supply, they were selling it. And the queues were usually very long, and people had to come up very early to start
get
purchasing.
some.
With the Russian presence, was there any significant change in attitudes to the Jewish population?
No, I would say in reality that under the Russian regime, the attitude towards the Jewish population by the authorities was better than under the Polish authorities.
Wow.
It was officially
More strict.
an offense to call anybody a Jew, and you could complain to like the militia if they, and there were certainly no anti-Semitic violent attacks which existed under the Polish regime.
Yeah, 'cause I
And
guess
did you continue going
Russia
to
was a lot
school under the
stricter.
Russians?
Yes,
To
they
even
continued. They changed
Poles.
immediately. Of course, that school, I went to the same school. In the first year, they naturally they canceled the teaching in Hebrew, which they considered a capitalist Zionist language, And the first year they taught us in Yiddish,
Okay.
introduced everything in Yiddish, with the exception of Ukrainian and Russian languages.
Oh, but no Polish language.
The next
Wow.
year they switched entirely to Ukrainian because we were 2 years under the Russian regime until 1941 when the war broke out between Germany and USSR.
Yeah.
And that was the same school, only different teachers, different management, and different
In
supervision.
Ukrainian.
Any particular event or memory that you have of your time growing up as a child before, let's say, the 1st of September 1939?
You mean before the first of
Any pleasant, unpleasant, any particular event or thing that stands out in your mind at that time?
Well, we had a number of unpleasant events. For instance, the school that I used to go to was practically parallel street to where we lived. But in the street where I lived, we had opposite our place, we had a big Ukrainian school, and it was always dangerous thing for me when I was coming back from school because the Ukrainian kids used to attack us and belt us or as much as they could. And that was,
Eesh. Kids are cruel.
I recall it. And that has all that part, I must say, and it stopped completely once the Russian regime was instituted in there.
Okay.
There were no anti-Jewish
Attacks.
excesses, you could say, violent excesses at all, by either the kids or by the grown-ups.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, I'd like to move along a bit now.
Interesting.
And as you're aware, the events in Western Poland changed dramatically.
Yes.
How would the events after the 1st of September 1939 affected you in Lvov on the eastern part of Poland?
Well, our things have been changed that more or less you could say that the accommodations have been more restricted. Everybody had less, among the richer ones.
You're talking about the general population.
General population. And we obviously have been affected. The food position, while it was adequate, it was not the same as was before.
Reduced
Everything
food.
you had to had certain amount of coupons for certain things, otherwise you just had to queue up. So that was a problem. But from the kids' point of view, small children like us, we really didn't feel anything. If anything, we were at school, we enjoyed ourselves. Russian propaganda, and they used to entertain the children. They used to take them for all sorts of sports events, and so from that point of view, we really had a good time. I would say the kids.
And what about the adults, your
still very
parents?
young.
The adults had the greatest struggle, naturally.
Yeah.
From the point of view of, I suppose, trying to just manage from day to day because of the food shortages, of clothing shortages, everything was
Restricted.
short. You could not just walk into the store and buy anything that you wanted, even if you had the money.
Mm.
So there was everything, either on allocation, either coupons, either restricted distribution, or there was just basically less goods, number of goods available to
During
everyone.
wartime.
And how long did this continue till? When did you first start to feel the German presence in Poland?
Well, when they walked in 1941, I think in June, they marched, and with the offensive, they just went right into
So
Eastern Poland.
what happened then? The Germans marched into Lvov. What happened? How did you feel it as a Polish community person and as a Jewish person?
No, there was entirely different feeling for the Polish and for Jewish. Jewish were immediately, the persecution started immediately as the Germans walked in.
What do you mean? What happened?
Well, the first week or two, they had, well, you could call it they used to, for instance, every now and again, they used to stand in the street and call whoever, particularly Jewish people. Some of the Ukrainians were with them, and even some of the Polish population assisted them, and denigrate them and beat them up in front of the other population. And that was a norm. That was in the initial first sort of couple of weeks.
This is in June, July 1941.
Right, that's correct.
And what happened? Did it got worse? How did
It got worse. Then it was sort of this sort of sporadic beating and attacks have been, you could say, cancelled, and the introduction of supervised persecution sort of started. So first they came, I remember, and they allocated, for instance, our apartments, and they sent some people, German people from working for railways or something, and they took most of the furniture which they used for themselves. So that was just came in, and they had allocation, and they took the furniture. And then a month or so later, there was official announcement that all the Jews have to move into the allocated Jewish quarter.
Yeah.
Do you know what month that would have been?
But, I think it was around maybe August.
1941.
1941, yes. So
Escalated so
everybody had to
quickly.
move there. Of course, everybody had already less belonging and furniture. Most of the furniture had been, and we also, everybody had to find their own sort of. But so you moved into a place. I vaguely remember, like a one big room with the kitchen in the corner. That was in a Jewish quarter.
How many people would have moved with you in your family? Your whole family moved?
Yes, well, the whole family moved, yes, and
So that's when they
even
were
I
still
remember
together.
one aunt with her daughter, and it's all into this huge, one big room.
Let me ask a question here. Between 39 and 41, you would have heard a little bit of what was going on in Western Poland. Did this cause anything or any thinking by people living in Lvov to possibly think about leaving Lvov,
Yeah.
leaving Poland?
Great question.
I did not hear very much.
I mean, you were young.
Did not know exactly what was happening, how bad the things were. And some of the members of even the Jewish population who ran away from the West, and they were in,
They
at one
came
stage
east.
they registered for to go back, because the Russians made arrangement with some of the German representatives.
Oh, God.
And allegedly the Germans said anyone who wanted to go back to the place where they lived before, they would accept them. And a number of Jewish people have registered, because to get their own home and everything. As a
They thought it'd be
family of
better.
my present wife, they have done the same thing, registered. They came from Krakow. So I don't think
My softer came from
people
Krakow.
were aware at that time how bad the things were under the German. In the early stages,
They weren't sure.
only created, I understand, these ghettos, but there was nothing further.
So from your understanding, there was very limited information.
That's
coming.
correct, yes.
Wow.
Just going back one step, when the Russians were forced to leave, would there have been many people that took advantage or tried to leave with Jewish population, leave with the Russians?
No, not many. Number one, there was a disastrous, the offensive of the Germans was very fast, very successful, and Russians Russian army almost collapsed. So there was
Wow.
very fast withdrawal,
Couldn't.
and they would not
Yeah.
allow the civilian population to, to block the roads or something like that, or
Yeah.
to try to go with them. So that, number one, they couldn't, and number two, somehow
Wouldn't allow it.
they were not aware what a disastrous future they were facing. No one could imagine that.
So the choices for the local Lvov population were just...
Well, they were restricted, number one, and the few who probably could. My father could have, but he refused. He was under the impression that if he would go to Russia, he would never get out. And under the Germans, only the first few weeks would be difficult because there would be anti-Semitic excesses, and he will be mainly against the males, grown-up males. That was the impression they had. And after that, seeing that he was in big business before the war, he was under the impression that he'll be able to get away together with his family somehow.
He was able to continue his business under the Russians.
He would hope. No, he wasn't, but he
thought he would be able to.
He was hoping that after the Germans, we will be able to get away from Poland, to get out.
As you'll later see, none of his family made it.
It's set up over there. Certainly not in the kitchen. And even the mobile of this.
My name is Danny Katz, K-A-T-Z. Today's date is the 28th of March. I'm conducting an interview with Mr. Emanuel Mansberg in Sydney, Australia. Emanuel, I'd like to continue now with the bringing of the Jews into what you would call a localized area. Could you explain what sort of area of town this was and what the conditions were like and what you were able to do in terms of livelihood?
Well, in the area which was probably one of the poorest area of the town, conditions were like, well, in our apartment we had naturally bathrooms and inside, and
that would have been a privilege.
all these modern
indoor
commons.
bathrooms.
Over there, when we moved, the toilets usually were outside, old houses, with a little, with the big rooms where everybody more or less lived, the whole family, with a stove in one corner. People were employed. I really don't recall. They were mainly employed by the Germans, had to go to work, and they were giving some allocation of food in the early stages. I just
do some work that the
and
Germans
most of the
benefited
people,
from, like
whoever
ammunition
had
or
something,
making
were
things.
trying to sell it on the market and collect money and keep on buying food. That they, were trying to survive from day to day.
Who would have been controlling the Jewish, would you call it a ghetto or just a section?
At that time it was only a Jewish quarter.
Okay.
It was not fenced yet.
Okay.
There was, they formed the Jewish committee. The Jewish committee had
no
to
fencing.
be in charge of the affairs.
Who appointed the Jewish committee?
The Germans. Germans requested Jewish communal leaders to form a committee, and they were dealing with them. And the Jewish communal leaders sort of this committee had to pass on to the Jewish population all the new laws or regulations that have been
made
established by the German authorities.
Yeah.
As a 10 or 11-year-old, would you have been aware of what some of these new rules and regulations were?
Yes, I remember that I was very small, and initially I, for some reasons, I had an uncle and aunt who still stayed in a non-Jewish quarter. I don't know how they managed to do that. They had an apartment there.
Maybe they
And
converted, or
I
don't know. That's so
used
cool.
to go to their place, and when you were already 10 years old, I think 10, they insisted, I don't remember exactly the age, you had to have the, what do you call it, the star, Jewish star on your arm. Every Jewish person had
Even
to
children.
wear one. And
that
I
law
didn't,
changed.
but if you were below that age, you didn't have to. So I didn't wear it. And I remember I used to go sleep there at my uncle's and and come very often and buy for my parents
Food and
bread or food, because they were a bit cheaper in the Aryan areas or non-Jewish areas.
Were you able to move freely between the Jewish quarter and
Yes,
the area?
yes.
interesting.
So there were no real restrictions on movement yet?
No, not yet, no. Not in the early stages.
Right. When would these restrictions have come into place?
I think it was sometime in
So cute.
1942.
Yeah, so the year
I think
after.
in the
Beginning, the end, the middle?
I think must be in the beginning, 1942, restrictions started, yes.
So really for 6 months,
Yes.
approximately,
Right, right.
the only real difficulty was being moved into the Jewish quarter
And reduced
and having a few new rules
foods
and regulations, but
everything.
otherwise still being able to work, still being able to survive and live as a Jewish population.
We had to work
Was the
what
Jewish
they wanted
community
you to.
life still existing in its same form that it did before the Germans arrived?
No longer. There was constant fear, and every now and again, I remember they used to had these actions, and they used to take young people, for instance, and they established, I remember the first, what they call it, Zwangsarbeitslager on Janowska. That was KZ camp, in other words.
How would you describe that?
Well, it was, the people were already taken in to work, and they lived in these dormitories.
A labour camp, a work
Labour,
camp?
it was like a labor camp, yes. So they took quite a number
When
of
would-
young people.
When would this have been?
That was very early, I remember, sometime in 1942, in the beginning of 42.
Right. So you've had the first 6 months have still been relatively quiet.
Yeah, but they had this sort of,
Labour camps.
you could say, actions from time to time in a small scale, and I remember that my brother has been taken very early in this, and he was taken to this Janowska concentration camp, and used to go out. They used to go out to work, and they
then
used
to
to go
stay.
back to the camp. And the conditions in the camp were very bad. Only that we used to, through my wet nurse, she used to deliver him food in the mornings when
She
he was
was
outside.
so brave,
So-
that wet nurse.
I wanted to come back to
I
the
hope we
wet
hear
nurse.
her name.
I didn't ask you before, but I'll ask you now. Could you tell us her name and spell her name, please?
I love this
Yes,
interviewer.
her name was Katarzyna
Katarzyna.
Shenko, which is spelled Katarzyna.
Katarzyna.
And her
that's
surname?
Shenko, Sienko.
Right, the question I
Katarzyna
wanted to
Senko.
ask was, when you
Thank
were
you.
moved into the Jewish quarter, did
She
she
was
go
incredible.
with you? Was
No,
she,
no. She lived outside in the Polish Aryan quarters.
But did you have contact with her?
Yes, all the time.
In
My
what
family.
way?
I understand. Well, my family, my father arranged to pass on to her before we moved there all the jewelry and whatever valuables we had, and furs and things like that. And she took it.
She was such a hero.
Wherever she lived.
Brave ass woman.
And she used to help us all along.
How did she help?
Well, so some of these things she used to sell and used
Get you
to
food.
help us with the food. Always bringing us food, meeting us somewhere and giving us food.
Was she able to come to you in the Jewish quarter?
Yes, she could, in the early stages only. Otherwise, the later stages, she used to meet us outside.
She's the only reason
where
I'm
we
alive,
used to
by the
go
way.
to work or come back to work
Her and my
before
supper.
entering the ghetto.
Would this sort of assistance by Polish Aryans as opposed to Polish Jews, would you know if that sort of assistance was a common practice?
No, very few.
She was a
Very
hero.
The Polish population was very strongly anti-Semitic always.
Well, why would this woman have been going literally out of her way to help
Not
you?
only that, risking her life. Well,
Risking her
the
whole
only
life.
explanation was that it was, as far as she was concerned, she considered our family almost like her family, and she considered me practically her child. That was the only explanation I could give.
When would this sort of, let's say, clandestine assistance from her to you stop? Did it stop at all?
No, it never didn't
She-
stop
the
at
whole
all
time.
until liberation.
Right. Would you like to explain how her involvement in your...
I think they tried to sponsor her to come
Situation.
over to
Well,
Australia, but I don't remember
We
what
lost.
happened.
I think my brother was already on this in this concentration camp in Janoska. My sister and my mother, I think, were taken in. There was a big action. I remember September somewhere. I think it must have been 1942, right? And they have been taken away. So
Do you know where they were taken?
No, nobody knew all of this. They took a lot of people.
Just never knew.
There were
Insane.
rumors that they were moved somewhere to other parts of Poland to concentration camps.
The women's
But we
concentration
didn't
camp
know
or
what happened to them.
something.
And the rumours didn't mention which sort of concentration camp?
No, no one ever knew.
And this was about
Could
September
have been Birkenau, I'm
1942?
not sure.
That's right. And then I was left there only with my father, and we were going to work every morning. Then by that time there was a established ghetto with the fences, and on the gate each morning they were already like in a concentration camp. People were allowed to stay and live in this ghetto, only the ones who worked either for German army or for German Richtung was armament.
Yeah.
So they used to have we used to have big either R or W. And if you didn't have that, they used to take these people away, obviously, because these
you
people
could
were
only
not
stay there.
gainfully employed as far as they were concerned.
If you were employed in that,
And then
those jobs.
my father contracted, I think it was probably like hepatitis, I don't know, and he died something in March of 1943. And shortly after, I was the only one left, and I could see that, there was no chance of me surviving there. And I arranged with my nurse, who used to come to bring us food practically every day outside the ghetto, or sometimes she used to come to work when we were quite far. And I remember she paid we had, what you call it, foreman, Polish foreman, and I took my yellow star, I had a
The
R,
band.
and I had also this.
Magen David.
By that time it wasn't yellow, it was just a white, on white thing, blue star. And they, I remember, escorted me to a part of the Polish quarter after work in the evening, and she came there, met them, And I think she paid them something, I don't remember. And then she took me
take you.
out to
God,
another
she's so
place
brave.
where she lived, as
Okay.
if I was just a friend.
Okay, I want to stop there for a moment and just backtrack. I want to see if you remember, or ask if you remember when you started wearing a star, because earlier you said when you were 10 or 11 you were able not to get away with not wearing a
Right,
star.
being small particularly, I was very small.
He's a little boy.
If you maybe
Oh my God, my
remember
makeup. Oh
when you
God.
started or when you were told you had to start wearing a star.
Well, when
Maybe 12.
I think it must have been towards after September 42.
Right. And do you remember when you were allocated to a work party, the R or whichever work party you were allocated?
Well, I was with my father
Whatever your
arranged all
dad
that.
was,
I
yeah.
don't, because he worked there and he was like a little foreman among the Jewish workers in this egg sorting setup, and he arranged for me to work there as well. And we used to go out from the ghetto in the morning, and outside they used to pick us up, this foreman, well, one or two Polish foremen, and at certain stage the warehouse was quite far. They had a truck,
To
and
drive
they
you there
loaded
and
us
back.
on the truck, and they took us up there. And we worked all day, and then towards the evening they used to bring us back to the ghetto.
You mentioned just a second ago egg sorting. What was the activity, what sort of gainful employment, to use your words, did you and your father do for the
Well,
Germans?
they were packing eggs into the huge cases, and you had to sort them. And in those days, they had little tiny lamps, and each egg, before being packed, had to be examined, like under such lines, so that they are not the bad ones, and the bad one had to be put aside, thrown away. You see. And then these eggs had to be packed then in like a straw,
Carefully.
type of straw, in huge cases, and the cases nailed, and then the cases were sent either to Germany or I presume to the German army front units,
Yeah.
where they were utilized for
Feeding the troops.
eating.
What would your hours of work have been?
All damn day.
All I remember is very early in the morning till
Very late at night.
late in the afternoon.
Right.
You see, I don't remember what time we used to leave, probably around 7 maybe in the morning.
Okay, I just want to ask a general question. Would you recall who were the guards to the gates to the ghetto? They were Germans?
Germans
Do you
and
know-
Ukrainian police as well.
Right. Germans, were they...
SS.
That's what I
All
wanted to
SS.
ask.
They were all
yeah.
SS.
Right.
And they were,
So by now, the people that were, or the Germans who were controlling you, were the SS.
SS, correct.
Anything else that you want to mention about your time up to 1943 when you went off with your nurse? Anything that you may want to mention of importance, events or any significant thing or person?
It's all I only remember that we lived in a. Then it was, each time after each action, as they used to take away the Jewish population, the numbers were reduced, and they were reducing the ghetto, and the fence. Obviously, they could afford for the fence to
Make it smaller.
make it smaller.
So the ghetto area was becoming smaller.
Smaller and smaller all the time, yes, as they used to. And every now and again, I remember as people were marching out, every now and again, despite R and W, they used to select some people
To still take them
and
away.
used to take them away, reducing the numbers even further. Obviously, it was a systematic
Culling.
destruction of the population and reduction of the number of people.
Would you have known where these people, where the
No.
selections were going?
Our understanding was they were usually taken to concentration camps in other parts of Poland.
And again, you weren't getting any
Never,
information coming back.
never. No.
People weren't able to get back. Once they were taken,
We never
no one
heard from them.
escaped.
No one ever heard.
Okay, now you've met up with your wet nurse again.
Right.
Would you like to explain what happened then?
Well, she took me that evening to one place, and she had already arranged another place where she rented the premises.
Now this is early
rental property.
1943?
That's, yes, it was, I think, I don't know, must be after my father died, after March 1943. I think I had a date somewhere, just
That's not important.
Yes.
Early 1943.
43 years since. And she, next day, she arranged for me in the evenings to go to that new place. It was a little cottage
Only at night.
which she rented, which was on a separate sort of area. Unfortunately, it was reasonably close to the
The ghetto.
ghetto.
That's why it was
because they were
affordable
the
rental.
cheapest areas, naturally. And the owners of these premises had another little cottage living in the same area. There was a little fence around it. We could say it's small, two little cottages. And she had a separate one with only, it was very small, only one room, a kitchen, and a toilet, and a little shower sort of. And she had a cellar in it as well. And I came there because the owners did not move in yet. So she moved in first with me, and then they moved in. So they didn't know I was there.
They didn't, yeah. She risked her
And
life
then
countless
she used
times.
to go every morning out, early in the morning, and come late in the afternoon. So during the day I could sit in the room
You wasn't
or
allowed to
in the
leave
cupboard if
in the
someone
daytime.
knocked. And if there was something more dangerous, she kept me down in the cellar.
If it was like inspections
how
or
I was
anything.
there for 14 months.
14 months.
Did you ever leave the cottage in
Never,
14
not
months?
during, no.
Did anyone else know you were there besides your nurse?
No, though only some members of her family. She had a sister in another part of Poland. She knew. And that's about all.
Any event that you can recall?
Well,
Were you caught? Were you nearly caught? Were you
No.
ever worried while you were there?
yes, well, the problem, when they were liquidating the ghetto,
Yeah.
which I think it was something like 1943 in May, there was complete liquidation of ghetto.
Jeez. So good thing you
Complete
got out when you
destruction.
did.
They came in and they took everyone, and they knew that a number of people were hidden, and then they started burning some of these premises. So people, whoever been in hiding,
Burned
were
to death.
jumping out or running out of it when they used to shoot them. And that was going on, I remember, for 2 or 3 weeks. And I was terribly frightened because we were quite close, and they were searching areas in the vicinity for any people who maybe or could have escaped. And the ghetto was practically burning, you see. And that's, for I think, two or 3 weeks they were doing it.
It's
Why do
horrifying.
you think you weren't discovered?
Only luck. I mean,
Luck.
they just did not open, she was out each morning, and I remember that once some of them came on this and asked only these owners, is there anybody living here? So they said, no, there's only one woman, but she usually goes to work in the morning. And they didn't pursue the matter any further. Sometimes in
Thankfully.
certain locations, they did. They just broke the doors down just to see who is there. That was only sheer luck, I would say. There's nothing else.
Sheer luck.
And the other
yeah.
family
But
that
he just
moved
stayed
into the
hidden.
cottage next door, they had no idea you were there?
No idea, of course.
He would have
No
never
idea
come out.
at all.
Risked.
Do you remember the
risked her
street
life.
where this cottage was?
I think I really don't remember. I don't know. It was Kresova, maybe, I think.
Kresova.
Would you like to spell that?
Kresowa.
Kresova. I really
Now, you
want to
said you
visit
were
there
there
one
for
day.
about 14 months.
14 months, yes.
What did you used to do during the day to pass time?
Well, she used to bring me a lot of books. I kept on reading.
Oh.
That's all. Sitting and reading while the light was on.
Any particular books you remember?
No, just whatever she could lay her hands on. Mainly novels and fictions and things of that kind.
Now, you wouldn't know, well, you wouldn't have had a need to have any false names or anything because you were...
No, I couldn't.
Yeah.
Besides, you could not get it just like that. It was sophisticated operation to have
Proper
these
documentation.
documentations.
Yeah.
You had to buy it and
Bribe for it. And
from a specialist who used to forge it. And it used to cost a lot of money. And I didn't have the sophistication at that time, being a young fellow.
Where was Katarzyna working at this time? Do you know?
She was not working anywhere. She used to go in the morning and come in the evening.
So she would
She
go...
used to visit some people, friends, and so on. She had accumulated, we had left her whatever we had, and she used to
okay, good.
keep
So
on
she didn't need to
selling
work.
it slowly
Yeah.
and utilizing the funds to keep me and to keep herself. Like she had some valuables, jewelry.
Katarzyna
Do you know if she
is
helped anyone else?
an angel.
No, there was no one else. Only me.
So when would you have left this cottage?
When the Russians walked in 1944, I think they liberated Lvov in, I think it was September or October 1944. I think it was October maybe, 1944. They liberated Lvov.
And what happened when they came in? What did you do?
Well, she didn't want the owners to know that somebody was there.
Yeah.
So
She's
we waited
smart.
till it was very, very dark, I remember, and she let me out through the back. I mean, there was a back gate in the little yard, you see. So I went out, and I went out the gate, and I walked a little bit for 20 minutes or so outside, and then I officially rang the main gate, asking for her. And they let me in. And I was, from then on, so I was officially there. Just a friend.
Wow. So
They
then
did
he
not
was
know who I
allowed
was.
to be there.
So how long did you stay with her?
I didn't stay very long. I think
Yeah.
2 weeks maybe.
Oh,
or,
wow, that's so
because
short.
then there was a Jewish committee formed for the survivors, and they were checking who survived, trying to and giving a
Contact.
list of Jewish people who survived the Holocaust.
That's when he found out his
See if
whole
anyone
family.
knew somebody else's from the same family. And in the committee, I found my uncle survived in Tarnopol, which was another that was a smaller town than Lvov.
Can you spell that?
Yes, Tarnopol, Tarnopol.
Tarnopol.
And that was in the eastern part of Poland. And he was a doctor, and he survived. He was hidden by a woman who was a wet, I think the wet nurse of my little cousins, girl cousins,
Wow.
who were the daughters of my father's brother, and somehow they survived. I think because these 2 girls survived, and he, I think, either there or he survived with hidden place another woman. I don't remember exactly, but
That's
he
awesome.
survived. Then his wife and his son.
They all survived. Yeah. His uncle's family.
Kind of thing.
Wow. The most badass women in the world.
My name is Danny Katz, K-A-T-Z. Today is the 28th of March 1995. I am conducting an interview with Mr. Emanuel Mansberg in Sydney, New South Wales, Australia. Okay, Emanuel, or Manny, I'd like to continue now after the Russians have arrived in 1944, what your life was like, how you tried to put your life back together, any family that you made contact with, where you made contact with, and understand what the attitude would have been, or the mental picture of a Jewish population, which was once a thriving Jewish population, what it would have been like now in 1944. So first of all, if we can go back, you went to Tarnopol. If you could explain what you did in Tarnopol.
Well, I moved there. My uncle asked me to come, and he at the same time also brought in these two girls who were my cousins, the daughters who survived. They were nurses.
Yeah.
So we lived there together, myself, my two girl cousins, they were younger, a little bit younger,
Okay, younger than him.
and their son. And so they 4 children.
Now, what was the name of your uncle?
My uncle, his name was Hirschberg.
Could you spell that, please?
Hirschberg.
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 And his first name?
He's temporary. If you forgot, I knew it.
That's okay.
Okay, we'll come back.
Anyway, yes, he was a doctor. He was in that place for many years, and he was well liked and by the population in there. And then he established immediately a practice. We lived with him, and we immediately enrolled, all of us and myself, in a school.
Wow.
Which was naturally, at that time, they allowed us, it was a Polish school.
Oh, wow.
They allowed us to learn in Polish, but there was Russian and Ukrainian languages
As well.
taught as well.
God. I wonder why they allowed Jews to go to there.
They tried to, it was like a concentrated year. In 1 year, they tried to make up for the years that we lost to a certain extent.
Could you imagine trying to go back to like normalcy at a school
Teachers,
after all of that?
In 1 year, like you could say 2 to 3 years.
How would you describe the attitude of the teachers? Sympathetic, understanding?
Well, yes, my recollection was it was reasonably sympathetic.
That's good.
It was, I can't recall now who the teachers were, but I vaguely only remember that the things were not too bad as far as we are concerned.
That's good.
And the food was, though the things were difficult during the war, because my uncle was a doctor there, he had a number also of Russian
Coupons.
officers coming there for consultation and medication.
Oh, of course.
And they all used to bring,
Russian
like
coupons.
the old countries used to bring chickens and eggs and butter. And so
Lucky.
all I recall that we seemed to have,
Good
we
food.
had quite a lot of food. There was no shortage of food.
That's so fortunate. That's wonderful.
Okay, and how were you treated as a Jewish person in that new school, you and your cousins?
I recall, I can't recall very much of my schooling in at that particular time, but that wasn't too bad.
That's good.
And this was when, about October 1944?
Yes, October 1940, starting, yes, October, November, December. Well, I was there for quite a few months. We did not go to Poland till about till after the war. The war finished on the 9th of May 1945, which is my birthday.
So you stayed in Tarnopol
Till after,
The war.
yes, till about July or August. And then my uncle elected to go to Poland, because we were apparently given the choice for all the previous Polish citizens. If they saw the Tsar, they could go to the Polish. There was a Polish Republic, which was under the USSR. It was a communist regime.
Right.
So where was Tarnopol?
Tarnopol
Is it in
was
Ukraine?
at that time, which was east from Lvov, that part was annexed by the Ukrainian Republic.
Yeah, Ukraine.
Lvov today and the whole area where I live is no longer Poland,
Yeah.
but it is part of Ukrainian Republic.
Yeah, but at the time,
And it was all
Lvov was
Ukrainian
Polish.
Republic. So that's why they given the previous Polish citizens, particularly Jewish, if they saw the Tsar, to move. You could elect to stay if you wanted to.
Right.
But if you decided to go to the West, they gave you permission and you loaded whatever you had, I remember, on the train, and you were shifted to Poland, mainly to the western part of Poland, which was annexed by the Polish Republic,
Yeah.
taken from
The Germans.
Germany. It used to be before we went to Silesia, which was used to be western part of Germany, and now it became part of Poland. And there were plenty of empty houses because the Germans ran away,
I see.
and they were shifting populations. So we were entitled to go and move into any of the empty
You could just
apartments.
choose?
So
Were
where
they
did you and your
apartments?
uncle and cousins move to?
We moved to a place called, under Polish name was Zabrze,
How
Zabrze.
would you spell that?
Zabrze,
Zabrze.
but under the Germans, before, it was called Hindenburg.
Hindenburg.
And what did you do now that you'd moved to?
Well, now we have taken in the main street a big apartment, and my uncle established a practice there, and we went all to school. And I went then again. We had like you would have here the 5th and 6th year
Yeah.
in the high school. They introduced again the concentrated study
To cover a bunch of years worth of.
scheme for
Yeah.
the people who lost during the war. And they
Far
done
out.
again 2 years in 1 year,
Yeah.
and you set for your matriculation certificate,
Wow.
which I did.
How old would you have been at this period?
Well, I was about 17.
16,
17
17.
and a half.
Okay,
And your
17
cousins,
now.
were they with you as well?
Yes.
And
yes.
how old would they have been?
My cousin was only about a year younger than the boy cousin, and I think the girls were about 2 years.
Cool.
And one of the girls left us because her uncle and aunt survived, another uncle, which were on her mother's side.
So not your relative.
So
yeah.
they said they would take one girl if she
Wow.
decides to live with them. They had no children.
Oh, okay.
And the other one stayed with us, the younger one.
Interesting.
So then we only had 3.
Kids.
There were 3 children.
Can I get the names of those cousins? I'm not sure if I got them earlier.
One is Julek, that was the boy, that was his name was Hirschberg,
Ulrich
because he
Hirschberg.
was the son of this, my
Doctor.
uncle, doctor.
Right. Could you spell that, please?
Yes. Julek. And Hirschberg you have from the
Julek.
previous one.
Right.
And the other one was, the girl was Rita, R-I-T-A, but her name was Mansberg, just like mine.
Right. So you finished your high school education
Right, yes, in Poland, in Zabrze.
In Zabrze.
and then what did you do?
And then we, at that time, I think, joined or hires Jewish American committee arranged for
Passports.
Jewish population, whoever wanted to, with the Polish government. I don't know, I don't remember what the arrangement was, but somehow anyone who was Jewish, provided they could prove being Jewish, and they used to get this identity card, could leave Poland. Because don't forget that we were really living under the communist regime. And
Still,
no one
yeah,
really was
communism.
allowed to leave.
And
But
they
the
would have been
Jews were
scared
allowed to
that
leave
things would have gone
Poland,
bad again.
most of them,
Why wouldn't you?
to enable them to go to Israel if they wanted to at that time. And my uncle, I remember, arranged sort of different, I think he must have paid some, and we went by train, and we took, I remember, all the belongings, whatever he had, and we were going by train via Czechoslovakia to Vienna, to Austria.
Who's
Everyone.
we?
That's my uncle, my aunt,
Your cousins.
my cousin, and both the cousins,
Yeah.
my cousin and the girl cousin. And that's how we went through Czechoslovakia. And I remember in one small town in Slovakia, then the train stopped, and the very small Jewish community came there and took us all out to the little town, to like a town hall, and in the evening the boys from Briha, I don't know if you heard of Briha, they came with a truck and loaded us, all of us, with all our belongings, and they got us through the border to Austria, to Vienna, to this Rothschild hospital, which was really not a hospital, it was just like a center which the Jewish survivors were allocated, either going west to other countries or going to DP camps, waiting the possibility of going to Israel. That's all other countries.
Yeah.
Can you describe Bricha and spell it, please?
B for Bob, R for Robert, I for Ivy, C for Charlie, H for Harry, A for Arthur. That was, I understood, organization set up by the Israeli government. And
Never heard of it.
at that time, it wasn't Israel yet, and they were transporting Jews
Around the world.
from the east, basically, to the west all the time. They had the border guards, I think, bribed and all that. Everything was arranged.
Wow.
And they were moving people along. There were many young Jewish boys who were doing all that.
Right. What was your feeling about leaving Poland?
Yeah.
Oh, I was happy. I didn't want to stay in Poland. Things weren't that good. I mean, in our town, we didn't, not exposed to too much anti-Semitism, but there was even a pogrom once in Krakow after the war, I think towards the end of 1945 or beginning 46, anti-Jewish demonstrations.
Eesh.
And what happened?
Well, the government squashed that, but you see, the
desire.
after these horrible experiences of ours, to go to face this sort of thing, number one, we didn't expect it will happen, But it did happen.
Scary.
So nobody wanted to stay in Poland.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you were happy, your family was happy.
Whoever could. People used to go without anything, just with a rucksack, just to get out of. There's most of the Jewish population at that time, I think, moved out. Very few were left.
Okay, in Austria, in Vienna, what did you do in Vienna?
In Vienna, I was enrolled immediately at the Polytechnic, what they call Technische Hochschule Wien. It was a famous polytechnic. I enrolled to study chemistry.
This is like tertiary education.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was. Polytechnic is like it was here, University of Technology.
Yeah.
And how long were you there studying?
I stayed. We arrived there. I think I think we arrived around December or end of November in Vienna, and I studied there. I was enrolled. I didn't study too much, and I left Austria sometime in end of February.
Okay. So a couple.
And where did
months.
you leave Austria for?
I went directly to. I had a permit. I had an uncle and aunt in Australia who sent me a permit, and then I obtained a visa
To come to Australia. But he didn't know any English
Austria
at the time.
From
Zero
it
English.
must have been British consulate on behalf, and we went by train to Paris.
Who's we?
I mean, not only me, I remember some other people too, not going necessarily to Australia, to other. That was all arranged by joint. And in Paris,
That's
we
where
were
everyone left.
about, I think, 5 days. So they allocated us into the little place, pensions, different people, until they arranged and they gave us coupons for little restaurants were mainly giving us food. And then they loaded us, all the people. Then I found there were a number of other people who were going to Australia, and they loaded us on train, which went directly to Marseille, and we boarded this ship Johann de Witt.
A big old
There were
ship.
720 Jews going to Australia at the time.
And when did you arrive in Australia?
I arrived towards, I think, middle or towards the end of March 1947.
47. Wow.
Okay, briefly, what have you done in Australia since you arrived?
Well, I remember when I arrived, I lived with my uncle and aunt. They never had any children, so I was really like accepted like their child.
This uncle and aunt, they'd been in Australia how long?
My uncle, I understand, he arrived here in 1938.
Yeah, so before the
And
war.
my aunt in 1939. He arrived first because
So they got out before.
Before the war.
So
yes.
glad, yeah.
So did you continue your studies?
Yes, when I arrived here, 47, I first started learning English.
Yeah,
in
English.
evening.
He had to start while here. I can't imagine
and
moving
then,
to a country and not
I
knowing their
enrolled
language. It
At
just
that time was
starting.
Sydney Technical College.
UTS.
Again, chemistry. But I started really the first year in 1948. That's why I was working during daytime and studying at
So
night.
you were working and studying part-time?
Right.
And when did you graduate?
In 1954 I finished.
Wow.
I finished 1953, but the graduation ceremony was in the beginning of 1954.
Yeah.
And I got my Bachelor of Science in Applied Chemistry from the University of New South Wales. They started
UNS.
The new university at that time.
And if just again very
UNSW,
briefly,
sorry.
which sort of jobs did you have after you graduated?
Yes, I worked for a company called, as a chemist, Geigy. At that time it's a very...
Ciba-Geigy.
Ciba-Geigy, yes. And then I worked for other companies, Polymer Corporation. And after that I worked for International Trading chemical companies. They traded in chemicals, and I was running the office, the American firm,
American trading. Cool.
Jewish firm from New York. They had offices all over the world, and we traded in chemicals and plastic raw materials, and I was running the office.
Now, somewhere along this time you married?
Yes.
When did you marry?
1956.
Right, and who did you marry? And if you know the maiden name of your wife, if you could...
Yes, I married Janina. Her maiden name was Schneider, Schneider. She is also of Polish descent, born in Krakow.
And when did Janina come to Australia?
I think she came in 1950.
Right, and do you know where she and her family were during the war?
They were in Russia.
They escaped before the war to Russia.
People who moved from the west to the east and registered to go back. And all of these people, the Russians didn't send back, but they took them to Siberia. And so, at that time everybody was despairing about it, but it turned out to be
safer.
The best thing that could have happened to anyone.
Now, do you have any children?
She got to stay with her family.
I have 2 boys, grown up. One is 36, and one is 33.
Right. They're living in Sydney?
Yes, they are both living in Sydney.
They've got children?
Yes, one has 2 girls, 9 years old, and another one
my
has
cousins.
2 boys, one 2 years old and one 1 year old.
I wasn't born yet.
So you're a grandfather.
My older brothers.
Your wife's a grandmother as well.
Correct.
Let me
she's a
now
great
try and
grandmother
wrap this up.
to my cousins'
I'd like you to now
kids.
think 50 years after these events. Is there a message? Is there any message that you get out of this that's important for the world to know? What happened to you, how do you relate that to your children and hopefully later on to your grandchildren?
Wow, it's just horrific experience. I think the only thing that allowed me to carry on normally is that I just, part of the time, I couldn't believe that it was happening. It's not that I lived through it, and after all, I know that I had a family. At times, I couldn't believe it was a real thing. It was unbelievable, horrible, like a nightmare. So you just can't comprehend that any country, particularly where people in those days used to think the Germans were highly cultured people, that thing could have been really, it was systematic destruction, killing, a genocide on such a grand scale, and you have to live through it. Being paranoid, I mean, most of the time everybody was sure that they were your last days. No one believed it's possible to survive.
So awful.
What message would you give to your children or your grandchildren?
Well, try to remember that and make sure that it never happen again to anyone.
To anyone,
doesn't matter
even
which ethnic
non-Jews.
group it is.
Yes.
It should not happen. It should.
And one of the last questions, what do you say to those who deny that the Holocaust took place?
I just can't comprehend anybody making statements still to the people who are survivors and they can visually recall these horrible experiences. And so just like this fellow David Irvine, I can't comprehend that the person of his academic caliber can maintain such a great lie.
Like, why would it be
Unless
faked?
it's,
How would it be faked on such a grand scale? It's
to
insane.
Controversy, and by virtue of that he became famous, which he maybe never would have achieved any other way. It's impossible to comprehend how anybody could deny that when they Well, we lived through it. We've seen people being shot, killed every day. And some people don't maintain it never happened.
Manny, on behalf of the Shoah Foundation, I'd like to thank you for your time. And in a few moments, we'll have a look at some documents and photos, and maybe you'll be able to introduce to us your wife, Janina. Thank you again.
Janina is her English name. There she
Manny,
is.
would you like to introduce this lovely
My
lady sitting next
softer.
to you?
So that's my wife, Janina Mansberg. Her maiden name was Schneider. We got married in 1956. And we have 2 children and 4 grandchildren. And she survived in USSR, in Russia, in Siberia and in Uzbekistan, the second part of.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
And Manny, if we could just go through some of these photos, explain to
I
us who
have.
they are.
Well,
On my
this
phone, some of these
is my
photos.
sister,
And what was her name?
Evelyn,
Right.
and this is my father.
Okay, just go to your father. A bit slower on each because I
I
want
see. That's my father.
to. Don't sort of touch him if you can.
Ah, that's my father.
Right.
Can you just talk from your father now?
And that's my second on the right is my father. Then next to him is the photo of my mother. And next to it is the photo of my father and my uncle, who is my father's brother, and 3 of us.
Oh my God, they look identical.
Children. That's myself, the smallest, my brother next to it, and my sister.
Evelyn,
on
she
the
looks
right.
so cute in those glasses.
The big one.
Yeah, I
The
have
big
this
one
photo.
is
That's
photo
Manny, the
of
little
my
baby.
whole family. It's my father, my mother, my sister, my brother, and myself sitting on my mother's lap.
You look so cute.
Next to it is one of the latest photos of my brother.
What year would that have been
Before
taken?
he died.
I think when under the Russians, must have been around 1940 or so.
Get some stills for him so the sun play with. Okay. Okay, the one on the left.
On the left, that's my sister, my brother, and myself. I'm the smallest.
Again, do you know what year that would have been taken in, Manny? Roughly?
Well, before the war. I must have been here 5 years old.
Both his siblings perished, and he
So 1935,
never knew how
something
or
like this?
Yes.
when. And his mum.
Next to it, that's the place we lived on the first floor. That's the building in Lvov, in Poland.
Do you remember the address of that house?
Yes, Zamknięta. You spell it ZAMKNIENTA, number 3.
I'm going to try visit there one day.
Right.
No.
And who's,
Okay.
Next,
Okay.
that's the latest photo that I had. That's of my nurse, Miss Katarzyna Sienko,
A hero.
who saved me and helped helped all our family right through the war.
do you know what year that photo would have been taken in?
I'm pretty certain he
after
tried to
the war.
sponsor her
It's
to
after
come
the war.
Yes.
to Australia, but I'm not certain what happened. I'd have to double check.
Yeah. Okay. Shit.
Right? This is my identity card issued by the United Nations DP organization. It was UNRWA in those days. It was issued in Vienna.
In 46.
Let's go close up and see.
And for all you Americans, he was born in May. We all use the correct date. I hope you Americans eventually do the correct date.
Yes, so that's
day, month, year.
identity card issued by the Jewish committee in Poland. After the war, opened up. May, July, yes, 1st of August, 1946. That's before we left Poland. It was issued to every Jewish person to enable them to leave Poland.
And where was that issued? Which town was that issued in?
In Zabrze.
Zabrze.
Yeah, it's written in Zabrze.
So that they were allowed to leave, immigrate somewhere else.
You showed all that, yeah. Yeah, that's good. Okay.
So this is, it's a sort of like an identity card issued by International Committee for the Jewish camp sort of survivors and people who ran away from
Escaped.
Germans and survived. And it establishes that it verifies my name and where I was born, and arrived in Vienna, living in such a place now. That's about all.
Okay, I'll just take some close-ups of it.
It's such low quality, you can hardly see. I'm very glad he came to Australia out of everywhere. I'm so grateful to live here. It's one of the safest countries in the world. It's just fantastic to live here. I'm so fortunate. Alrighty, everyone. That was my grandfather telling his story for the sponsored interviews and such. And yeah, I didn't remember most of that, honestly. It had been so long since I last watched it. I genuinely didn't remember most of that at all, but I am so lucky to have this footage. It is such a privilege to have this footage and his own words letting us know what he went through. And it sucks that he went through that, but I'm so grateful to him, my Safta, my Safta's parents. So yeah, her English name is Janina, but her actual name is Yanka. And I'm so grateful to Katarzyna, an absolute hero in my life. And yeah, that's the story of how I came to be born in Australia. Both my parents were born in Australia, and my dad, I think he did know Polish a bit growing up, and I don't know any Polish, unfortunately, but I will go one day to both Krakow and Lvov. I will. I don't know when, but I'll try. So yeah, it's sad, but it's we're very lucky. We're so lucky, and I'm so glad that out of everywhere in the world that they could have gone, that he had family in Australia. I'm so grateful because I'm very happy to be Australian, and it's such a beautiful and safe country. I don't know, and especially Sydney, Australia, like I just feel completely safe, and I've never desired feeling like I need to go anywhere else. I've never felt the way that my Savta and Saba had ever felt during the wartime, and I'm so grateful for that. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed. I'm sorry if I didn't have that much to say or to react. I just, yeah, it's tragic, but it's beautiful that I have his words. I don't know, I'm rambling, I'm so sorry. But thank you all so much for watching, and for those of you who suggested, I think on Patreon I will also include a bunch of photos that you saw there, but also a few more later photos of the happy couple of my Savta and Saba. Very cute photos. I've got tons of them, so I'm gonna, yeah, maybe pop that on Patreon if you're interested. And yeah, thank you all so much for watching this alongside me. This is very vulnerable, and I don't usually talk about my personal life too much unless it's very distant past, and this feels a lot more recent. I don't know, seeing him in the 90s talking. But yeah, thankfully I at least do remember memories with him, and I remember that he adored me and thought I was adorable. And I remember specifically one memory of him is me sitting on his lap at their old house, and I had this red cup that was my special cup, and I was drinking from it when I was 3. I was on his lap. And I also remember Busha, which was my great grandma, my Savta, her mother. I remember her as well. I didn't ever meet Gaga, which was my Savta's father, but I'm very glad that my Savta got out before the war started in Poland, so that she escaped with her parents. She was an only child, she didn't have siblings, but yeah, her story is just as unbelievable in a different way, and yeah, I'm very, very grateful. Okay, thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to leave a like if you'd like to, and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.